You're listening to the Potaholics Comedy Network. Potaholics.com.
Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And this week we are talking about the fall of video games in 1983. And Tyler, take it away.
Oh, man. So, we are on Chapter 14 of The Ultimate History of Video Games by Stephen L. Kent. This is about the fall of the video game industry. So, in 1982, arcades had started collapsing, but it wasn't immediately obvious because they kind of hit a slump at this point. And in hindsight, it's easy to look back and say, oh, yeah, clearly this is where it happened because the graph goes down. But at the time, it wasn't super obvious. And they thought, hey, you know what? We just need a game. We just need a good game. Arcades got no games. We need good games.
Yeah.
So they got some good games. They got a lot of good games. They got Ms. Pac-Man. They got Dig Dug. They got Donkey Kong Jr. They got Pole Position. They got Q*bert. They got Tron. They got Robotron, both of which were good games, even though they have similar names. Robotron, unrelated to Tron. You got Burger Time. You got Mario Bros, which is unrelated. Well, not unrelated to Super Mario Bros, but it's not the same game as Super Mario Bros.
Bros. Just two bros.
Just being super plumbing.
Plumbing bros.
In the New York sewers.
That's right.
Where there's monsters. So the first game I want to cover here is Robotron 2084. They picked 2084 because we were starting to get to the year 1984, and it wasn't turning out to be like George Orwell's 1984.
I love this. It's like, oh, it's not going to happen like he thought it would.
Yeah, like, oh, we're not quite there yet. Apple had an ad at the time for the Macintosh where they were like, 1984 won't be like 1984 because you're going to buy a Macintosh and you're going to overthrow the oppression or something. Anyway, it's a
using a computer is going to be really good for you to not speak in double plus good speech. That's the most I remember from that book.
Yeah, it's a good book. It's a good book.
It was good, yeah.
So Robotron had machines taking over the world after humans created them, kind of like what we're having a little bit of that with Westworld these days, or Detroit Become Human.
Oh yeah.
So it's a little bit of ahead of its time, although the Terminator was kind of going to be around in the 80s.
Yeah.
Right? So
I feel like that whole robots taking over the world genre has definitely been around.
Yeah, it's been a little while.
We love it. So
in Robotron, you and your family, the last humans, are surrounded by robots. You gotta like shoot them to get them. Yeah. So that you can be not taken over by robots.
Not robot killed.
Yeah. Pew 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 pew. And there was bad guys coming at you from all angles. That was the cool part of the game.
Yeah, and you were like in the middle, right?
Yeah, you're in the middle, and this dude's coming everywhere, and you can pew 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 pew.
That's good. That's a good act out.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
So now you've heard me do that, you don't need to play the game.
No, yeah. Spoilers.
This was the first game to have a twin joystick setup. So you had one joystick that controlled movement and another joystick that controlled aiming, kind of like Geometry Wars.
Oh, yeah.
This was pretty difficult at the time, like because no other game had two joysticks, and people had a hard enough time with one joystick at the time. So having two joysticks was pretty tough. Yeah. People weren't as good at video games then as they are now.
We're all really good at video games.
I'm good at video games.
I'm good. If you listen to this podcast, you're good.
Yeah.
Do you know that?
You're good. And if you're not good, we'll make you good. Keep listening.
Right. It's in your heart somewhere. We just got to unlock it.
We'll just dig it right out of there.
Achievement unlocked.
That's right. So they sold less than 20,000 of these, but it was considered a success. And if you're a collector of arcade machines, it was a great addition to your arcade thing. It's a pretty decent game, and it's relatively rare.
Yeah.
The next game I want to talk about is Q*bert, which is not to be confused with Jaybird, which is a knockoff game that I used to play on my dad's old Apple II. When I used to play games on that.
Big Jaybird fan? Big
Jaybird fan. Played a lot of Jaybird back in the day. I remember seeing Q*bert at one point in time, and somebody being like, "Oh, this is Q*bert," and I'm like, "That just looks like a knockoff of Jaybird." And they're like, "I hate to tell you this, Tyler, Jaybird was the knockoff," and my whole life was thrown into question.
But you know what? If you're the Jaybird #1 fan, so it's fine.
#1 Jaybird fan.
#1 Jaybird fan.
And this Jaybird is like the same game as Q*bert. Like it's like same. Pretty shameless.
They both have like two legs.
Yeah, it was a pretty shameless game.
Do they speak an adorable gibberish?
I don't remember. My Apple II didn't have a sound output on it, I don't think. So I never knew.
Games. That's probably better for your parents, to hear bleeps and bloops.
Yeah, the computer was loud enough by itself. I had a green screen too. It wasn't like a black and white screen or a color screen.
Just humming away.
Green, yeah. Mm-hmm. Like the screens in Fallout.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I had one like that when I was a kid. It had DOS on it.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Little math blaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
OG Math Blaster. Anyway, so Qbert began when an artist named Jeff Lee drew a pyramid of cubes on his computer screen. He was a fan of MC Escher, who makes things like really weird looking optical illusion paintings, and he was like, hey man, maybe there's a game in here.
That's the staircase guy.
Yeah, he does. He makes those weird paintings.
That's what I remember from
Yeah.
weird staircases. You try to follow it, you get lost, you feel confused.
Yep. He's just makes these really trippy images.
Good for him.
So anyway, Jeff Lee thought that maybe there was a game in here that he could play, that he could make. So he made a two-legged character with no arms. He kind of hops along the pyramid, and he shoots stuff at bad guys, and Lee called the game Snots and Boogers. It's pretty gross.
I really wish it was called Snots and Boogers.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Toe Jam and Earl hadn't come out yet and pushed that boundary.
A pioneer ahead of his time.
Indeed, yeah. So Qbert was kind of a skunkworks project. They sort of worked on it in their free time and in their after hours at work. It was Jeff Lee and Warren Davis. They both worked on this game. Eventually, they got rid of the nose gun because it wasn't very fun, and they made it more of a strategy game rather than a shooting game.
No more snots or boogers.
No more snots or boogers. It was just two-legged jumpy dude jumping on cubes.
I like that.
Yeah. Ron Waxman saw them making this game, and he suggested that the blocks change color as the little dude jumped on them, and then it hit them. The whole game could be about jumping on all the blocks and making them change the color to all the same color, or to the right color, whatever floats your boat there. Same thing. The enemies weren't very scary. They were just kind of ridiculous. They're little blobbies, little snakes. They had these two imps named Slick and Sam who would change the colors on those blocks back to whatever they were originally. And so they were all in there messing up your plans, whatever your strategy was for getting all these cubes.
Slick and Sam.
Yeah. You had to deal with Slick and Sam, and they were just super annoying.
Just a couple of jerks.
Yeah. They had a cool speech synthesis chip that they were trying to play with. It was pretty neat. It was like, it did some cool stuff. You could program it to sort of say stuff, but it couldn't really do that much. So instead of trying to make it approximate speech, they just fed it some gibberish data, and it ended up kind of sounding kind of neat, which gives you the classic Qbert kind of gibberish speak.
Language.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's what makes him really adorable. Like, he looks adorable already, but with the gibberish speak, that really just takes it over the top in the adorable factor.
Yeah.
I mean, not to just front on Jaybird right now. I mean, I'm sure Jaybird was adorable too.
Yeah. Qbert used to curse, though. He had a little speech bubble that had little like symbols in it to sort of like he was cursing,
like comic book cursing.
Yeah.
Like that's how you knew, like an at symbol and a number symbol and stuff like that.
Yeah. So he was comic book cursing.
So Qbert was kind of had a dirty mind.
Yeah, he's a little bit. Yeah,
he's a little bit of a bad boy. He's one of the original bad boys of arcade games. Qbert.
Yeah, Snots and Boogers, cursing. This was really ahead of its time.
But then Jaybird, per his name, did some time in the pen. I mean, he went to jail clearly. So I feel like they're both really bad boys of arcade.
That's right. Yeah, Jaybird probably a little harder than Qbert.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, you are the number one Jaybird fan, so you would know.
I'm collecting lots. I'm trying to start a professional Jaybird league.
Yeah, any JCS.
The JCS play in my attic on my Apple II every Tuesday.
Every time Tyler walks into a shop and he sees a piece of Qbert memorabilia, he just lights it on fire, just right there.
Just get real upset.
Just go for it every time.
Or I try to graffiti it to say Jaybird instead.
I appreciate it. The dedication to Jaybird.
Yeah, big fan. Loved me some Jaybird. So the next game that was pretty cool that kind of pushed some boundaries here in terms of technology was Dragon's Lair.
Yeah.
By a company called Cinematronics.
I'm excited for this.
This game was so cool because it used a laser disc to play basically movies while you were playing the game, and based on how you were playing the game, what buttons you were pushing, it played different parts of the movie. So you could make mistakes and people could you could lose, and it would play different stuff based on it. So that's super cool from a technology perspective. The other cool thing about it was they got Don Bluth from Disney to do the animation. So it was like playing an animation, a Disney movie, and it was like a knight saving Princess Daphne from the evil castle. It was like really being inside a Disney movie at the time.
That's really cool. I was so bad at this game. Like I didn't get it. It's a quick time event, right? Yeah. That's really what it is. And I didn't, but it doesn't prompt you what to do. So you kind of got to guess. Because I remember one thing it said, like, he'll walk into a room and there's a bunch of goblets, and if he drinks from the goblet, he gets poisoned and dies. And you just got to know to hit the other way to make him go back out of the room.
Oh, so that he doesn't.
So he doesn't do that. You just have to know that.
Yeah. wonder if people would like write down instructions and like stick it to the side of the machine.
I
like,
would. I mean, you gotta have a notebook. It would be kind of fun to have like a Dragon's Lair notebook where you know you write down what the next move should be, and you have it out when you play the game.
Yeah, that'd be kind of neat.
Yeah, you make your own little strategy guide.
Yeah. So it's a pretty cool game. The videos would play, people move joystick. It was great. Cinematronics was in trouble at this time, and they were a bit saved by this game. They were in Chapter 11 bankruptcy for a year before this game came out.
Whoa.
They had partnered with RDI Technologies to make this thing. RDI Technologies would later make a home Laserdisc game player. It flopped. There's only 2 games that came out. Fewer than a dozen of them exist. It was just bad. So RDI kind of fell off the map there. But Cinematronics had a hit on its hands with Dragon's Lair, mostly because of the technology. It was just so cool to like play an animated.
Yeah, that is a really cool thing. And now with games like Cuphead, it's coming back.
Yep.
Which I think is really cool.
The aesthetic is coming back there. It's pretty neat. They sold 16,000 of these units for $4,300 a piece, which is $11,000 today.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Coleco purchased the home rights to the game for about $2 million, which really put Cinematronics back in a good spot. They had a war chest built up now, and they had sold a bunch of these expensive cabinets to a game that was pretty successful. The other thing about the game was that it cost 50 cents per play, which was twice as much as the standard quarter. So this one was 2 quarters to play.
Whoa, a little pricey.
Yeah, so think about it in terms of today's money. That's like $1.25 to play around a Dragon's Lair these days.
That's a lot.
Seems like a lot of money.
Also, do you ever notice when you go to arcades now, most of the games are 50 cents? There's not a lot of 25-cent games anymore.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a bummer, because I really liked that.
Yeah. It's all that inflation, you know?
Oh, it's all that laundry money.
Yep. That's true. When I get quarters, I'm like, I gotta use this for laundry. I can't go play Dragon's Lair. I need to do laundry. They released a follow-up game to that called Space Ace, which was unrelated in terms of story and stuff, but it was the same kind of animation technology. That one came out a few months later. Problem with Dragon's Lair, though, was that it had some hardware issues. So at the time, Laserdisc players were pretty new, and they were designed to play movies. That was they're like Laserdiscs are like giant CDs, basically the size of a vinyl record, and they used to be able to buy movies on them, and they were higher quality than like a VHS movie. So that was the selling point there, was to watch these movies on Laserdisc. They look good. They look like almost as good as DVDs. They were huge. So anyway, the Laserdisc players were designed to read the video data sequentially from start to finish, because you don't do a whole lot of skipping around when you're watching a movie, probably. Yeah. So the lasers were made around that. In Dragon's Lair, though, that laser was moving all over the place, because people, depending on the decisions that you made, it would have to play a different video. Like if you died, it had to play the death video. And so the lasers moving all around the place was just not something they were designed to do, and so they kind of failed. They just would break, and they would have to get repaired all the time.
That's annoying for your old arcade repairman.
Yeah, so they didn't last very long, which is kind of a bummer. They did make Dragon's Lair, and Dragon's Lair 2, and they finished it up, but kind of after they finished Space Ace, but it didn't come out until 1991 because of a lot of different reasons that the book doesn't really go into. By then, Cinematronics and RDI had gone out of business. So Dragon's Lair 2, I think it came out, but
so it like briefly saved them, and then it was like they're gonna go out of business anyway, as all the companies are kind of not doing too hot at this time. Yeah,
kind of was a little bit of a bummer.
Aren't you saying something about Laserdiscs, like they can like go away after 30 years?
Oh yeah, Laserdiscs have another problem, which comes up decades later, in that they rot.
That's so weird to me that electronics rot.
Yeah. So and CDs can rot as well, and I think DVDs can too. I think like they not as much, because they've sort of figured out what makes them rot and can kind of fix them. But at the time, Laserdiscs, they didn't know they were going to rot after a decade or two, and so they if you have a Laserdisc now, you have to take really good care of it, because they don't.
Otherwise, you got to throw it on the compost pile. You know what I mean?
Yeah, throw it on the compost pile. I had a science teacher in middle school that had a Laserdisc player, and there was one movie that he played on it, and it looked great. It was pretty cool, and I remember he brought out this Laserdisc, and everybody was like, "Whoa, what's that?" And he had to explain Laserdisc and all that kind of stuff.
He's like, "I'm old." Is that what he said?
He said, "I'm old, and this is..." No, he actually wasn't that old at the time. He's old now.
Oh yeah,
but he wasn't.
Well, I mean, that is just how aging works.
Yep.
That's true. Also, did you like how I said, don't they go away after a while? Laserdiscs, like it's a...
It just disappeared.
like it just runs away?
It's kind of like Yoda at the end of, it just kind of disappears.
Yoda was a Laserdisc the whole time?
Yeah.
Spoilers!
He was a Laserdisc and he rotted.
I don't know if that's canon or not. Disney hasn't decided to move that over yet.
Yeah, that's some extended universe stuff that Disney doesn't want to get messed with. So remember, we're still talking about the fall here, but it is good to kind of talk about some individual games of the time just so you know where we're at.
I love it.
At this point in time, video games are starting to go mainstream. So it's just interesting that we talk about the fall and then we say video games were so popular at this time, right? In 1982, they were starting to go mainstream. The arcades were kind of failing still, but video games were creeping into the zeitgeist here.
Good use of zeitgeist.
Thank you. They were in American pop culture everywhere. When the VJs on MTV are talking about it.
Looking at you, Kurt Loder.
Yeah, Kurt Loder's talking about it. This is a popular thing. Disney came out with Tron around that time too, which kind of takes place inside a video game. Video games were a thing. Everybody knew about video games. A lot of people played video games this time. And because of home consoles, people didn't have to go to the arcades to play. They could play at the comfort of their home with all their game consoles, and there are tons of games coming out.
And all the food and drinks. You could just get the LaCroix in there and the pizza rolls.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
don't have to pay for them.
Yeah. There's just a whole bunch of crazy stuff happening.
Oh, man.
So,
It's a better time.
What a great time to be alive. At this point in time, Activision overtook Atari as the fastest growing company ever in America. So Atari was the fastest growing company at the time. And then Activision, the company that was created to sort of compete with Atari and making games for the Atari 2600, they got even bigger than Atari in terms of how fast they were growing. Like Atari released Pac-Man at this time on the Atari. And they shipped 12 million cartridges, which is insane for 1982,
so many.
considering there were only 10 million 2600s on the market.
Shooting for the moon.
They were really shooting for the moon there. We'll come back to Pac-Man on the 2600 in a little bit because it's a pivotal part of this. But the cool thing about Pac-Man was JCPenney ran a national TV ad. This was the first TV ad for like for software of any kind.
That's cool.
They
First ever ad.
Yeah, they were all in on Pac-Man fever here. Anybody who had space, any store who had space was trying to sell this game. Drugstores trying to sell this game. 7-Eleven's trying to sell this game. Toy stores. If you had a store...
You mean I could get a Slurpee and a corn dog and a copy of Pac-Man for the VCS?
That's right. You could.
What kind of magical fairyland were people living in 1982?
Do you remember in like 1998 at the height of Beanie Baby popularity when you could like go to literally anywhere and they were selling Beanie Babies?
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like that.
Are those still valuable? They gotta be, right?
Probably some of them are. I imagine they're not as valuable as they were sort of promised to be, but I think some of the more rare ones to a true Beanie Baby collector, those rare ones are probably still worth a lot.
See, Beanie Babies were around the time that Tamagotchis, and so that's what I was into.
Yeah.
I wanted to take care of something on my keychain.
Yeah.
You know? I had a Godzilla one. It was pretty rad,
That's
everybody.
pretty sweet.
Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I want to talk a little bit about General Computer, which is a company that didn't make computers. They made games.
Confusing.
Yeah, they made games. They made specifically. This was a company that was making enhancement boards for arcade games.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Atari had taken them to court in 1982, and they sort of kind of made a deal here with General Computer. They were like, okay, you guys got to stop making these games unless you make them for us. So we'll give you $50,000 a month, and you go off and you make your little games, and you do whatever you want, and we'll talk later, right?
Yeah.
So General Computer, what Atari thought they were doing was just paying General Computer $50,000 a month to go away.
Just get out of here.
They're just like, we don't want
Stop
you
making these boards.
Yeah, we don't want you competing with us. We don't want you selling upgrades to our consoles. Just go away, please, and stop making these. Atari was very surprised when a few months later, General Computer called them up and they said, hey, so we got this game. We made it called Food Fight. Do you want to see it? And Atari was like, sure. Yeah, I guess. We'll see your game. We didn't really expect you to make a game, but I guess if you got one, we'll take a look. It wasn't super impressive or very successful. They did release it. Food Fight was a game that came out. It wasn't awesome, but Atari was pretty impressed and pretty pleased with how fast they were able to make it. So they were like, hey, the 2600, the VCS, is at the height of its popularity right now. Every game we make sells awesomely. Why don't you guys just shovel out some games for us?
Just throw them out there.
Let's just make some games and get these things made. So they asked General Computers to make some games, and they did. They made a lot of games. They made the Miss Pac-Man port later on. They made the Centipede port. They made the Pole Position port. Lots of arcade ports that General Computer was making.
People love ports.
Yeah.
Boats love ports.
Yep. Boats love ports. Computers love ports.
Who doesn't?
I don't have a third thing for that list.
I don't either.
So, bummer.
I mean, if you like the left side of a boat, that's the port side.
Yeah.
There you go. Getting nautical. Sorry.
In 1982 is also when Atari decided, you know what? We can make another console.
Finally.
Let's make the Atari 5200. They finally took Bushnell's advice and they released the 5200. It wasn't very much more powerful than the 2600. And the early games that came out for it they didn't really show off what this new hardware could do. But it did run on the same processor as Atari's 8-bit computer, the Atari 400, which we'll come back to a little bit. We'll just talk about it briefly. The engineering team was really unhappy with it. They actually circulated a petition to get the controllers changed because the controllers were awful. They had joysticks that didn't center themselves. They just kind of flopped to the side like an old Nintendo 64 controller.
Just like they gave up.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, they were bad. And the engineers were like, we can't launch with controllers that are bad like this. But Mr. CEO Ray Kassar, he did not care. He launched it anyway. He was like, everything we do is gold. Put it out there.
We're doing this.
Yeah, so they did it. A lot of the early games were enhanced ports, and I'm saying enhanced with air quotes here, enhanced ports of 2600 games. They got pretty good reviews because they were the same games. They were still pretty good games, and they had marginally better graphics and sound, but overall they were still the same game. The 5200 cost more than a ColecoVision, and the graphics were not as good as a ColecoVision.
That's crazy that they let that come out, and it's not as good.
And it didn't have very many games. 5200 has no games.
Ain't got no games.
5200 has no games. And at first, when it first launched, it didn't play 2600 games. They later released an adapter for it so that it could play 2600 games, but it didn't do it at launch. So there was really no reason to buy a 5200. Ain't got no games. Didn't play your old games, and the controllers were bad.
And that's also terrible, too, because ColecoVision had a game adapter already for 2600.
Yep.
So you could play the 2600 games on your ColecoVision.
Yeah.
So they were just... That Connecticut leather company was just wrecking Atari at
They
this
were
time.
on fire, yeah. So 5200 had no games, and nobody buy it. Next console that came out around this time was the Vectrex, which was a vector console. We talked about that in the past. It was cooler than having raster graphics, and so it needed its own special monitor. There's a rumor that Ed Krakauer, the guy that made this thing, he met a businessman in Asia who had a warehouse full of these monitors that he needed to offload quickly, so he sold them for less than it cost to build them. They were originally made for like medical equipment.
like the heart scan or like the radio scope things or whatever.
Yeah, and so whatever company had ordered them sort of backed out, and this guy was like, I got this warehouse full of these screens. I need somebody to buy them, so I'll sell them to you for cheap. And so he did. The Vectrex came out and was only $199, and it was a total hit. It was a great price. It had some cool games. The Vector thing was like novel and kind of neat. The monitors were actually really expensive, though. The fact that Krakauer had got these for under market price meant that it was very hard for him to find them again after he bought the original shipment.
They saw what they could do with them, yeah.
Yeah, so he was unable to find these. So the rumor was that he had met this businessman in Asia that was going to sell him these cheap monitors, and then when he couldn't get the cheap monitors anymore, that's why they stopped. The actual truth of it that some people would say is that like literally nobody made these monitors anymore, and so they just couldn't get them
no
made.
supply.
No supply. Vectrex ain't got no supply.
It had games though.
Yeah, it did have games. They weren't that great. Like they were novel, but the vector graphics was like cool in theory because these lines were like super sharp and stuff. But ultimately, people just didn't. They sold them all. They sold all the Vectrexes, and they're still popular collector's item these days. If you go on the game collecting subreddit, you'll see every now and then somebody posts a picture of a Vectrex that they found somewhere.
That's cool.
Which is pretty neat. Yeah. Vectrex also made little watches with joysticks on them that you could play in class without the teacher knowing. Ooh. I had one of those watches. It was a Super Mario Brothers one. It wasn't made by Vectrex, but I had a little video game watch. So yeah, you could play them without teachers noticing, although I'm pretty sure. What?
Did you play Jaybird on it?
Yes. I hacked it to play Jaybird on my watch. Yeah, you could play these things in class. That's why they did so well, is you could play them in class. Teacher didn't notice. But the one that I had, I'm pretty sure was one that my dad confiscated from a student. My dad's a middle school teacher. And so I guess he saw someone playing it. And I think he confiscated it, and then like the kid didn't come back at the end of the year to like pick it up or something, and so he's just like, well, I guess I'll keep this.
I appreciate your dad's looting skills.
Yeah.
And he looted.
Yep.
And then he gave it to his son.
That's
what
right.
a caring father. And then
Indeed.
you guys played Jaybird together as the sunset.
Yeah, on the watch. We played Jaybird on the watch, looking at the sunset, and the teacher didn't notice.
And your dad's in class for some reason. I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, the Vectrex was pretty neat. They sold them all, but they just couldn't make any more for the same price, and so they just gave up. R.I.P. So that's
Sorry, Vectrex.
this is a world that we lived in at that time. These are the things that were coming out around that time, around 1982, 1983. As we move into 1983, we're going to hit the fall of video games, the massive video game crash of 1983. There were a couple of things that contributed to this. The first thing, lots of bad games being made.
Yeah.
So we're going to go into that now. In December of 1982, Atari said that they were only going to grow by like 10 or 15% this quarter instead of 50%. Yeah, this is something that always blows my mind, is that like stock prices will drop when a company says, hey, we didn't grow by as much as we thought we would. We still grew. We still made a ton of money. We just didn't make more than last time. And stock prices just
That's
drop when
crazy
happens.
that happens that way. I don't understand economics like this. Because in my mind, 10-15% growth, that's pretty good.
But if you bought the stock thinking that it was going to go up by 50%,
Oh, you're going to be bummed.
you're going to be pretty bummed when it doesn't go up, and so you're going to start selling. That's I think that's how that works. It's like when a company says, "Hey, we're going to make this much money this year," the stock price starts to get that sort of built into it, because stock price goes up when people buy it, basically, right?
Yeah.
People are willing to buy it, and so if they say, "Hey, we're going to make this much money next year," and people buy a stock thinking it's going to be that much money, when they say, "Actually, we're not going to make that much money this year," they go, "Oh shoot, I bought this thinking it was going to."
Sell.
Yeah, sell. So it crashes. Warner's stock, they owned Atari at the time, their stock crashed, and the rest of the industry kind of went along with it. That's the other thing that happens in like stock markets, is like when one company crashes and it's like not clear that it's because that company did it, other like people get scared who hold stock for other companies too, start to sell as well. And so it just like can cause a whole industry panic. So at this point, panic set in. We're only going to make 10 or 15% more than last year, not 50% like we thought. Everybody panic, sell. Even Ray Kassar sold a little bit of his Warner stock.
Ooh.
Just a little bit, which he shouldn't have done probably, because it looks pretty fishy.
Yeah, it looks like insider trading, right?
Yeah. So he said that he was selling it for something unrelated. He was going to invest in something else, and he just needed some cash to invest in this other thing. It looked pretty shady, and so he was like, all right, this looks pretty shady. I'll give the money back.
Yeah, he didn't get in trouble for it, but
Yeah.
he did get investigated, I think.
Yeah, because it looked pretty bad, right? And he's the kind of guy that would have inside information. If you sell right before you give information to stockholders that causes your stock to crash, that looks pretty fishy.
Yeah, don't do what Martha Stewart did.
Yep. So otherwise you go to jail. So Ray Kassar was like, I don't want to go to jail. Here's all the money back.
But you might get a TV show with Snoop Dogg.
That's true.
That is true if you do what Martha Stewart did. So it's, I mean,
Ray was like, do I want a TV show with Snoop Dogg, or do I want to not go to jail?
yeah, he couldn't decide.
Couldn't decide. So at this point in time, video games were just flying off the shelves. Everybody was buying video games. If it was basically kind of assumed that if you made a video game, you were going to make some money. So a lot of people made games. A lot of people made some money. And a lot of bad games started getting made.
Here we go.
Purina, we talked about this before. Purina made a dog food game. They made a game about dog food.
Oh, yeah? I don't even know. How would you do that? I don't even know.
I don't know. But this was the world that we lived in at that time, that Purina thought that this would be a good idea. And they were not the only ones. There were tons of other companies making terrible video games. This also happened after the Activision court case, where Atari was like, no, only we can make games for the 2600. And Activision was like, well, we can also make it. And the court was like, yeah, other people can make games for this. And so it was like, no holds barred at this point. Anybody can make a 2600 game, so everybody made 2600 games. And Atari was like, no, stop making bad games. I know Atari has games, but too many games.
Atari's got too many games.
Yeah, so it was the business execs, the suits, were making the decisions on what games were getting made, and a lot of those guys were young and inexperienced, and they just weren't making very good decisions, like the Rubik's Cube game.
This made me mad.
Yeah.
Like when I read it, I was like, this is infuriating. I get it.
So somebody was like, hey, you know what kids like? They love their Rubik's Cubes. You know what kids also like? Video games. You know what we should do? We should make a Rubik's Cube video game so you can solve this Rubik's Cube on your TV. And it was $40. And it was bad. I watched some videos of this game. It was
bad.
awful. Like, it was terrible. And a Rubik's Cube, an actual Rubik's Cube, only cost about $5 and was way better in every single way.
The only way I think this game would have been good is if you did something else while you solved it. Like you solved the Rubik's Cube and then stuff would happen on the screen, or maybe it would keep track of your points. But in the end, it is stupid. It's a stupid idea.
Yeah, and it's definitely not worth 8 times just buying an actual Rubik's Cube.
It shows like people, like when business people see something they can make money off of, how it just spirals out of control.
Yeah. So.
Like Bitcoin.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Or like DraftKings. Or like fantasy.
Just everybody on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So they made this game and it was bad, and they felt bad. I don't know if they felt bad, but they should feel bad.
You should feel bad. You heard it here first from Jaybird himself.
Professional Jaybird player. I pay myself to play.
JCS
Jaybird.
Professional.
Meet in my attic Tuesday nights. We just crowd around my Apple II. So the other thing that happened around this time was Atari. They said, hey, we got this massive hit called Pac-Man in the arcades. We got this massive hit called the Atari 2600 in people's homes. Why don't we put these guys together, make it a mega Pac-Man game for the Atari 2600? It'll sell great. He said, how many copies do you think this game will sell? Atari was like, well, we're going to sell 12 million of these at least.
That's confidence.
That's confidence, especially considering that Atari had only made 10 million VCSs. There were only 10 million 2600s in people's home, and they made 12 million copies of Pac-Man.
That's so crazy.
And they were like, look, literally everybody who has a 2600 is going to buy this game of Pac-Man, and 5 million more people are going to buy 2600s so they can play Pac-Man. Can't fail. And that's actually...
It's too big to fail.
It's too big to fail. I actually like this bet that they made here. I think that had Pac-Man been a game that worked and was like good, this would have actually paid off.
Do you think it would have saved the fall though?
That's a good question. I do think that. So Pac-Man failing because it was bad. It was terrible. It was not a good. It was not a good rendition of the arcade game. It was not good by any stretch of the imagination. Bad game. A lot of people bought it. They sold about 7 million of them still, and they were so bad that people started bringing them back for refunds. So I say this to set this up because at this point, the public was kind of like, look, we all bought this game and it was bad. You can make bad video games.
Yeah.
And so there's like a switch that got flipped. Not that bad video games didn't happen before this, but this was such a large moment of like, this was the game that everybody wanted because Pac-Man was so popular. They got burned on what should have been a true home run, true slam dunk for Atari. More sports metaphors, right?
Real touchdown.
Real touchdown.
Real goal.
Field goal. Real hat trick here, right?
It's a hat trick. 3 goals.
That's
crazy.
Right. So the public was like, this was the people at large, the video game playing public was like, shoot, even a game like Pac-Man can be bad if they make bad games. We are now going to put our thinking caps on every time we buy a video game because we all got burned collectively here. And so it's sort of, I do think that maybe if it hadn't been Pac-Man, might have been another game, right? But so
might have been the game we're going to talk about afterward.
So the next game that happened sort of takes right after this was E.T., the Extraterrestrial. It was a game that is sort of a meme in video game industry here. People talk about it as being the worst game of all time. And, you know,
it is.
Yeah, it is. They're not too far off.
It is.
Yeah. The most unfun game of all time. So a little bit of backstory on E.T. the game. They had a hit movie at the time, right? This great extraterrestrial game, E.T. Phone Home. Super great moment in movie history. Ray Kassar thought that making a movie game would be a bad idea. He's like, we don't need to make games about movies. Steve Ross was like, hey, Ray, so I just gave Spielberg $25 million so we could make a E.T. game. How's that sound? And Ray was like, you did what? And Steve was like, we're going to make an E.T. game, right? $25 million? We're going to be rich? And Ray was like, oh, God. And Steve was like, well, I already gave him the money. So we doing this or not? And Ray was like, yeah, okay, I guess we're doing it. Yeah. So they made this deal in late July that they were going to release a game by Christmas. Even in the 80s when games didn't take as long to make as they take now, This was a really ambitious
This is
timeline.
like no time at all.
Yeah, this was a terrible like timeline for people for somebody to make a game. So they called a lot of people to make this game. The only person who agreed to do it was a guy named Scott Warshaw. He agreed to make the game after Ray personally called him up and was like, "Hey, man." Because normally Ray is his big high-powered CEO. He doesn't call people. His people calls people, right?
I got a middleman.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But Ray called him up and was like, "Look, Warshaw, everybody else has told me no. We gave Steven Spielberg $25 million to make this game. Can you make this game for me?" And Scott was like, "Yeah, I'll make this game for you, Ray. Because you called me personally."
It sounds so intimate. I love it. Yeah. I'll do this for you.
I will do this for you. Because Howard Scott Warshaw, I should say, his first name was Howard Scott Warshaw. He had made some good games in the past, and so Ray trusted him. And because everybody else said no, this is why this guy ended up making this game. He knew it was going to be bad. He knew he didn't have enough time to do it, but he did it anyway. And the game came out, and it was bad.
Also, didn't they want to make it into a like Spielberg said he wanted it to be a maze game like Pac-Man, and they're like, no, we're going to do our own thing, and that was like the first big red flag.
Yeah, so yeah, it was kind of they sort of went off the rails on making the game, and it just was bad. It was terrible. Programmers hated it, people hated it, everybody who worked on it hated it because they had to crunch in 6 weeks to make this terrible game. They ordered 5 million cartridges because, well, Steve Ross, the guy, ordered 5 million cartridges because he thought it was going to be that successful. It just wasn't.
Didn't sell.
Yeah, didn't sell. E.T. was bad. And by this point, the public couldn't be fooled, right? Because they had been burned by Pac-Man. And so nobody bought E.T., especially because it was bad. And so 2 big high-profile flops like this, especially one as bad as E.T., because it was, like, it didn't even sell well. Pac-Man, you could at least say, well, it was a success because it sold well, right? Mm-hmm. E.T. didn't even sell well.
Yeah, E.T. you can get, like, stuck in pits. You couldn't even get out. Like, it was unplayable.
Yeah. So the public at this point, they just could not be bamboozled. E.T. didn't sell. It didn't fool anyone. And at this point, Atari is kind of in a tailspin because they spent a lot of money on this E.T. license. They spent a lot of money making a Pac-Man game. They just spend a lot of money. And so they tried to buy all kinds of arcade game licenses trying to save this. They spent a lot of money getting a bunch of different licenses. But they just couldn't pull it together. And sales just almost completely stopped. At this point, people were like, wow. Video games was a fad. I knew it was a fad the whole time. They're over now. All the good games have been made. You don't need to buy any more good games. This is it. Video games are over. Like, see you later. And so Atari had to lay people off. But it wasn't just Atari, even though it was a lot of what they did is what caused this thing. It sort of just splashed into the rest of the companies too. Mattel ran into problems. Coleco ran into problems. Just everybody stopped selling games. Most of these bad games ended up in a New Mexico desert because they had to get rid of them somehow. Imagine making something, putting like a lot of effort into a thing, and it being so bad that not only could you not give it away, not only could you not just take it to the dump, you had to like buy or rent trucks to cement over it. That's so how bad these games were.
Yeah, and that all takes place in that documentary Atari Game Over.
Yeah.
Right, which we think we're going to do a whole separate episode on.
Yeah.
Because it deserves some. This whole thing is like we've been very much base level with this, I think, because there's a lot of stuff that went into this also.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot of like high level, like, oh, people made bad games and so the industry crashed. But yeah, in 1984, Warner sold Atari. That was it.
That's big.
GG. Atari was pretty much donezo. I mean, they existed as a brand, but they didn't really exist outside of that. Mm-hmm. So I said there were 2 things that contributed to this. Number 1, lots of bad games. People couldn't be fooled. Number 2, about this time was the height of, or was a height of personal computers, or home computers being very popular. People really liked them. These kind of started in the late 70s, around the same time as like the 2600 came out. Like the Apple II was kind of coming out then. But we had like, even Atari made a computer, Atari 400, the Atari 800. You had like the Commodore 64 came out in 1982. These were things that you could sell to a person and say, hey, you can put your recipes on here. You can do your business stuff on here, right? And if it doesn't do something that you need it to do, you can just write your own programs. So people were like, yeah, I'm going to buy this thing. If it doesn't do what I need to do, I'm going to make my own programs. Turns out programming a computer is very hard. It's very difficult, and it's not just something one just does without making it sort of a hobby, right? But one thing that computers were also good at was playing video games.
They're so good at it.
They're so good at playing
They're
video
so
games.
good at playing video games. Computers are great.
Yeah, and so they weren't in direct competition with consoles, but there was a lot of competition in the home computer space. Like I said, the Commodore 64, the Atari computers were out, the Apple II was out. There's a lot of competition. There's tons of computers coming out around that time, and so they were starting to get really cheap. They would cost about as much as like a game console, and you could do other stuff on it besides play games. And so that was like a huge selling point. And so while Sears couldn't sell an Atari 2600 to save their life at this point, nobody wanted to buy that. They could say, buy this Atari whatever, Atari 400, and do your business stuff on it. But you can also play games on it. Not 2600 games, but they played different games from consoles, but you could also play games on it. And so that's another thing that sort of contributed to is like, why would I buy a console when I could buy a computer that can also play games and do all the things that I'm not going to do with a computer. I'm just going to play games on it. Yeah. I'm just going to play Jaybird. Like that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that's your life.
Yeah.
We should mention that Tyler is a huge PC gamer.
I am a huge PC gamer.
He walks into his room and he flips off every single one of his consoles.
Yeah.
And then he sits at his computer and he whispers to it, "I love you so much."
Yeah, it's true.
Is that every day?
Yeah, almost every day.
Almost every day.
Yeah.
And your consoles just cry.
Yep.
Cry. But you don't care.
I don't care.
Because you love Jaybird.
So I just fire up my Apple II and I play Jaybird.
When we say PC gaming, he only plays Apple II.
Yeah.
We're going to do, by the way, we kind of decided that after this is all done, we're going to go do a history of PC gaming.
Yeah.
Because the book really doesn't talk about that as much. And I think that's something we need to mention.
Yeah, there's a lot of like sort of parallel and then convergence that happens here that is kind of fun.
Yeah, and I want to talk about it.
Yeah, and I love old computers, so
it'll be fun.
Big fan.
It'll be real fun. What have you been playing, Tyler?
I have been playing still Destiny. That's a standby. Always playing Destiny. I actually haven't had that much time to play stuff this week because my parents were in town visiting.
So just a lot of Jaybird with your dad.
So I just played a lot of Jaybird, like mostly just Jaybird. In between Crucible matches on Destiny.
Because Iron Baron, I haven't played a lot of Iron Baron this week at all.
Me neither. I got all my pieces of armor from Iron Banana.
Nice.
And I do still want to keep playing it because there's some stuff that I still want to get. I want to get some of the ornaments and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm getting close. I realize the only character that doesn't have armor is the Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
He's missing pieces of it, but everyone else has full sets.
I only play on one character right now, so.
And this is from my Xbox account that has all the characters on it, but now I'm going to switch over to PC.
Yeah!
Because today, after this, Tyler and I are going to play it on PC together.
Yeah.
Which will be fun. And then
some co-op Destiny.
That's right. I've been playing Red Dead Redemption.
Oh, yeah.
Because the new one comes out, and I never really played it or finished it, and I'm going through. I'm just kind of speeding through. I'm doing just the main story missions, just kind of get the story going, but I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Just the feel... When you go into Mexico, that song starts playing, and then you gotta
so far away. So
yeah,
good.
and then you just gotta ride to, and they don't like give you a destination. You just gotta ride to the nearest like town or whatever.
And it takes a while. Like you're riding for like a good solid like 5 minutes.
I like it.
Just like listening to this awesome song being
Builds
played as
a
you
mood.
cross the border.
It's good. It's real good. It really builds a mood. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
I'm playing that. I played Destiny also. I've been playing. I played PUBG again, and I just picked it up. We got 2 chicken dinners in a row.
Hey.
Me and my friends just squatted up, which is hard because I feel like squads, you got to keep track of multiple people.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at that.
It's tough.
Yeah. So, but I think it's pretty fun. We got those 2 chicken dinners. The game's still very broken. I parachute. I sit there and wait about a minute and a half before the buildings load in while I'm on the ground, hoping no one shoots me, and then I play. But this is on Xbox, so if you play on PC, I'm sure all this stuff's resolved.
Well, it depends on if you have a good PC or not.
That's true.
And you need a real beast to play that game at.
Oh, I have full settings.
Yeah.
Because it's also, I heard they also discovered a memory leak. Where, you hear about this?
No.
Where essentially the reason it kept crashing on Xbox so much is there was a flaw in the coding that the more games you played, the less RAM the game, it would fill up your RAM more and more and not clear it. And so it would just crash eventually no matter what.
Oh, wow.
The only way to fix it was to force quit the game and reopen it again.
Huh.
So, which we still do because we don't trust that they fixed it. But that was apparently a problem they had. I've been playing. I'm trying to do Red Dead. I think that's. I want to finish Red Dead so then I can start Mass Effect Andromeda finally.
Oh yeah, I did fire up the like remaster of the first Gears of War. I played the first mission on Xbox. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep going with it just yet. I do eventually want to play through that whole series, but I haven't committed to it yet. But it's cool and it looks great on the Xbox.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm glad they did like a remaster. I think 2 and 3 don't have remasters on Xbox, but they look on Xbox One X. They're like enhanced or whatever.
Oh,
they look all better than a standard 360 game, which is good.
That's cool.
Yep.
Well, rad. Well, we're gonna play that. Real quick, as always, Tyler, Twitter @SneakerElf. I am @MeColetta on Twitter. We have an email account. It's codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com.
Send us all your Jaybird high scores.
Jaybird related information, anything Jaybird related. We want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Also, we're on the Podaholics Network. They have a lot of great podcasts on there, articles. I have another podcast called Hug Life. Plug that. Also, our artwork is done by Dani Dodge.
Oh, yes.
And she's great at art. She's wonderful. She's amazing. She has studiododge.com is her website. She's got all sorts of stuff on there you can purchase if you want. And her Instagram is really good too. Follow her on Instagram @studiododge.
And that is her real name, Dani Dodge. This is not like a stage name. Like her actual name is Dani Dodge.
It's like Stan Lee wrote her name.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. But yeah, other than that, I think that's it for us today. Next week, going into some more history.
Yeah, dude. Anything you want to say before we go?
No, I think I'm good. Just you guys are wonderful. Thank you so much for listening. And Tyler and I have a lot of Jaybird to play.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
This has been a Podaholics Comedy Network presentation. Podaholics.com